You're listening to Period Story, the podcast where we get behind some of the myths and misconceptions about periods. We chat with women about their period story, their first period, and their journey ever since, and we open up a conversation to help break taboos and stigmas around menstruation. I'm your host, Lanice Brothers. I'm a registered nutritionist, women's health, hormone, and menstrual cycle coach, and the founder of Eat, Love, Move, a nutrition and well-being practice. Welcome to today's guest. On today's episode, we have Sharon Walters. Sharon is an artist, educator, and a part-time coordinator of community engagement programs at a London museum. Since January 2018, Sharon has been working on a mixed media collage series entitled Seeing Ourselves. Now with over 200 pieces in the collection, she has exhibited in a number of public spaces, including the Now Gallery in Greenwich and the New Ashgate Gallery in Surrey. Her work is shared regularly on Instagram through her London_artist1 account. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Hi, Lanice.
Hi. So let's start off by getting into the story of your first period. Can you share with us what happened?
So I can't remember the exact specifics, but I know I was around the age of 11. I do remember the feelings that I had around that time, which was that it wasn't really something to be that excited about. And I think that just stems from the way we talked about periods and the way they were viewed, and probably the experiences of my mum and both my mum and my nan. So those kind of experiences were passed down to us, really.
Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the experiences that were passed on that made you feel not very excited about your first period?
Well, I do remember that quite a lot of the time periods weren't really spoken about. So I remember a particular time when my nan was, she had this ottoman at the end of the bed, and I remember opening the ottoman and finding her sanitary towels. And she was really annoyed that I found these sanitary towels. And she was a lovely woman, but she was really annoyed I found them. And she said to me, you can't, those aren't for you. Those are for women. And, it was just slammed shut. So I think that was my initial introduction to what a period was. But later on, my mum, she just basically had really super heavy periods that were always painful. And so that was the kind of narrative that I grew up around, that they were something that were really difficult. They happened to you, and they just weren't very enjoyable.
So your nan was really annoyed that you found her sanitary towels. If you think back now on it, why do you think she was so annoyed?
I think maybe she just didn't have the words to explain what periods were to a child. And also I grew up in a time where children were to be seen and not heard. So you didn't really have a voice. You were seen to be a child, and as a child you only did childlike things and discussed childlike things. So anything beyond that was seen as something completely separate, and you're trying to be too fast, or you're trying to be too, involved in big people's conversations. It was that kind of rhetoric.
Given that rhetoric, how did you learn about menstrual health and what was actually happening to your body?
I didn't really learn at all. So I knew that I had a period every month, but I was never really told what that whole process was about. I don't think I even knew that you could get pregnant, those kinds of discussions didn't really happen. What really happened was, this is your period, here are the sanitary towels, you don't use tampons because you're too young, and that was it. That was the only discussions we really had. But I just knew it was something that I couldn't let my dad see. So you couldn't really leave any remnants of your period. It was there was a lot of shame attached to having a period. Yeah.
You said you just knew that you couldn't let your dad see it. Where did that knowledge come from?
Oh, from my mum.
Oh, she
So
had told you.
yeah. So if, for example, there was a tiny bit of blood maybe that might have been in the toilet, or there were sanitary towels, you had to make sure everything was, I understand that you obviously don't want everyone seeing your menstrual blood, but I kind of grew up feeling like it was something really, really dirty, and it was something that it wasn't for men to see, and it was kept very separate from my relationship with my father.
Have you ever had any conversations with your father around these topics?
No, 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 I haven't. And I don't know if maybe after this I might, but I've never had those discussions. It was just, I think the way we grew up was, it was something you spoke to about your mum, spoke to about with your mum, and or I might have spoken to my nan, but then the conversations would be very, very limited, and you knew there were boundaries that you just couldn't cross. And then there was just no one else that you could speak to about that stuff. So you kind of I grew up not really understanding and not knowing what was going on with my body at all. And I felt I think now looking back with hindsight, I feel quite disconnected. And I always have done with my period.
Even today?
Yeah, I don't think I ever really, I know, yeah, I don't, it just kind of seems to happen every month. It's definitely not as heavy as it used to be. It used to be horrendously heavy. And I used to leak regularly at night. And I used to wear multiple sanitary towels that I would have to change constantly. And it just became normal to be leaking everywhere and to be in pain and to be taking loads and loads of ibuprofen tablets to deal with the pain. And I think just because I grew up with that, that story those experiences of my mum and my nan, that this is what happens, I just took it as being normal. And I think it was only when I met you and started following you on Instagram, I was like, oh, she's saying that periods don't need to be heavy. And that completely blew my mind, because I knew that some people didn't have heavy periods, obviously, but I just thought it was quite normal. And so it's taken me over 40 years to start to see things differently. And I really think that was only through meeting you.
Wow. So going back to what you were saying about this idea of shame and periods being something really dirty,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that feeling translated into other areas of your life and the way you felt about your body?
Yeah, I think, well, I grew up Catholic, and relationship with sex, for example, was seen as something you don't do until marriage, and the idea of living with someone, for example, before marriage was seen as living in sin. And so, yeah, I think that fits around that whole kind of idea of things being dirty if not done in a certain way. And there was very, very particular rules that you had to follow in order to be seen or perceived as clean, if that makes sense. And it wasn't until my late teens that I started to undo those stories a little bit by, when I was 20, I met my husband and we lived in sin, and it was seen as living in sin. So.
So no sex until marriage, this idea of...
I didn't follow that one, though. I was like, yeah, that's cute, but no thanks.
I'm really interested in this idea of cleanliness and periods being dirty. And we didn't really talk to your grandmother or your mom about it. I know you have a sister. Did you have any conversations with your sister?
No, I can't remember conversations with my sister around periods. And if I probably asked her, we probably did, but I'm getting a bit older now. And I just can't recall the conversations. But I remember her experience not being that great either, as in she also had heavy periods. But that's as much as I remember. I remember her experiences to a certain extent, but I can't remember any real conversations.
What about your friends?
I just remember me having the heaviest periods and it being really frustrating and really difficult, and just knowing that a few days every single month I'd be in a lot of pain and they'd be super heavy, and I'd constantly be changing sanitary towels and leaking, as I said, and then not being able to wait until it was over.
So you didn't really talk to your friends about what was going on,
No, I don't think I did. I just think I kind of felt as though this was something that had been passed down, as in, and I don't know how true this is, but I felt that because my mum had really, really heavy periods, it was inevitable that I would have heavy periods and that would be my experience, and there was nothing that I could do to change that, so it was something that you just put up with and got on with it, and it was a few days a month and then you could move on. Until the next one.
Actually reading about sanitary towels and what to do, was it something did you just read the packet and just figure all of these things out for yourself?
Yeah, I think my mum might have initially showed me that you just take off, those sticky plastic things, or the thing that attaches to the sticky thing at the bottom, and you just lay them in your knickers and and that was it. There wasn't anything else to really be told, I don't think. And I remember having to tear them up and put them down the toilet. That's what I've just remembered. Yeah, having to tear them up. Ew, that makes me feel sick.
So you would actually take your used
yeah, I'm sure I did. Yeah,
and then put them down the loo.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I know. Oh, I'm going quite deep now.
But you don't do that anymore?
No. No. That's why I was mortified when I was like, oh, I used to do that. No. No.
What's really interesting is loads of women, they still think that it's okay to flush a tampon down the loo.
Really?
And I've seen posts on Instagram where people talk about how much tampon waste is contributing to things, plugging up the sewers and the drains. And in the comments, you see women saying things like, "Oh my God, I had no idea that I wasn't supposed to flush them down the loo."
But in public sorry to interrupt, but that's really interesting, because in public toilets, you see that you're supposed to put all sanitary in, one of those sanitary bins next to the toilet. So why would you think at home that it's really interesting.
I think sometimes, like, I can speak from my own personal experience. Like when I was using tampons, I had no idea. I would either just flush it down the toilet, or in public, I would perhaps wrap it up and put it in that bin, but I didn't make the connection. And I can't explain why. It just it never clicked in my mind until I started doing this work and reading around it. But yeah, tampon waste and menstrual pad waste is it's a huge problem for the sewer, and water companies in terms of like cleaning the water. So I think that's really interesting that you were told to rip up your pads and flush them down the loo.
Yeah.
What about your education in school? What sort of things did you have sex ed in school, and did it cover anything to do with menstrual health?
I can't recall it covering anything to do with menstrual health. I can't. I remember possibly we talked about sex, as in how you reproduce, but I don't remember any real kind of education around what was happening to my